got the whole team with me, or a good chunk of it. I got Harmony, Kurt, and Evan, who's apparently just going to man the chat, and Sammy as well. So we've got quite a few people here. While we're waiting for stragglers, because I think we are still waiting for a handful of people, we will do a quick highlight of the upcoming tastings, including a big one, which is sort of a tasting and sort of not an advent calendar, if you know what I mean. We've got our whiskey advent tastings online, open for sale. And tomorrow is the last day to get early bird pricing on it, on what we call the full Monty. I will note, I know a lot of people are disappointed that it is not a calendar with windows in it. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that, and I don't think that'll change. But what we can do is put 5 whiskeys in 5 different boxes and stack them together for you in a cube. That should still make you happy. We are doing the 5 tastings during Advent. Each of the whiskeys doesn't have the name on it, so there could still be an element of surprise for you, discovering 1 whiskey a day for 25 days, but hopefully saving enough for an educational tasting with a few of your friends at Kensington Wine Market. Yeah, other than that, we've got like quite a few other tastings coming up. I might share my screen here for just a quick second. Again, I know we're waiting for stragglers, but kind of working backwards instead of the other way, because as I mentioned, the last day to save on the early bird pricing is tomorrow. So quickly scrolling back up to the top, there's a society tasting this week. We've added a few virtual kits. Next Tuesday, we've got a Black Tot tasting, which will be awesome. We have 4 different vintage releases of their annual limited edition releases of the Black Tot, plus the 50th anniversary bottling. So it's going to be a baller lineup, and that's with our friend Mitch, who will almost certainly be wearing a very colorful shirt. And scrolling down, also coming up next week, the Unconventional Blends tasting, or sorry, 2 weeks from now, with James Bourne and I. We've got some fun stuff in there that we're excited to talk about. There's our single malt festivals in store. We've got 2 nights for that. I won't go through everything here. The OB 21-year-olds blind tasting, that's coming up too. So I believe, and Harmony can confirm if I'm wrong here, we have all of our current tastings poured and ready to go. Yeah, got a thumbs up on that, so that's a yes. There we go. We got another straggler just joined the room, so I think we're ready to get rolling. If you didn't catch the order earlier, Evan has put it in the chat for our straggler. I'll toss it in there too. 7 signatory bottlings. I believe 5 of them are from their 35th anniversary releases. And then we've got a couple more to add to that. I'm stoked about this, as I'm sure Kurt is, because 2 of them are from 1978, which is, we've said before, is the best vintage in history. I believe there might be 1 or 2 other 78s out there, so go Team 78.
It sounds very old.
It is old. Kurt
Yeah, really
and I
old.
should be revered elders, I believe is how we would like to be referred now.
I will
Is
address you
Harmony
as that.
is Harmony still within that window where we can fire her with no repercussions?
I don't think so. I
No.
think that was yesterday, was the deadline. Yeah.
Yesterday times like 10 or something like that. Regardless, no one's counting. What a comment, Kurt. So we've got these Bunnahabhains. 3 of the 5 releases in the Signatory 75th anniversary collection are Bunnahabhains. And the interesting thing with these bottlings is I believe these, like the 78 that they released for the 30th anniversary, are from a parcel of casks that Andrew Symington acquired a long time ago. Andrew Symington, who is the founder and owner of Signatory, his brother was a partner for a short while. And I believe as of last year, Kirsch Imports in Germany are co-owners of Signatory. But Andrew started acquiring casks in the early days of the single malt boom, the really early days. It was, I believe, 1988, if my memory serves me. And he was working at a famous hotel in Edinburgh. He met a lot of people in the world who were into whiskey. He got into whiskey. He decided to start buying casks. And his plan for the Signatory range, and where the name comes from, is that he had hoped to get a celebrity to put their signature on every bottle. Now, imagine that, like if he'd actually achieved that, because he's probably released at least 1,000 bottlings, probably more between now and then, maybe a couple thousand. To find a celebrity to endorse each bottle would have been quite the undertaking. But his first whiskey was so popular that he just decided to hell with the signatures, kept the name Signatory, and they went from there. And a lot of these whiskeys that we're going to try, like this 1978, this first one, the 30 or the 44-year-old, oh, there's Andrew, these are from casks that I believe he's had for, if not 30 years, then probably for at least a good 20 years. I mean, you don't see Bunnahabhain 1978, let alone 75, coming up from many other independent bottlers. How and where he acquired these things, I'm sure we'd all love to know, but he's not telling, and he's an interesting guy. Evan's met him. I've met him a few times. Both Evan and I have been through the warehouses at Edward Hour Distillery, the distillery they built in 2000, and where Signatory stores its casks and does its bottling. And you go through their warehouses and you can tell that they're not like a lot of independent bottlers that buy what they need and then sell it. He acquires casks probably at like good prices, and then he sits on them and bottles them slowly over time. We've seen parcels of things like Ben Nevis 96, Linkwood 95, Kleinlich 95, Bunnahabhain 89 was a vintage that we had a lot of really good signatories from. And he bottled a cask or two a year for a decade or more. And he was able to do this because he had this strategy of buying and holding on to things until they were ready to drink. He obviously had the means to do that as well, which is another thing to say, because most of the industry, a lot of the independent bottlers, small shops, they run fly by night, and they have to really sell what they acquire before they can buy the next cask. And to have the luxury to mature and hold on to these things for not just 2 or 5 or 10 years, but 20 or 30 years before you bottle them is pretty impressive. There's only a couple of independent bottlers today that can say they do that. Duncan Taylor, and certainly the Scotch Malt Whiskey the Society has done more of this, but really Gordon MacPhail obviously being the one who's done so the most impressively. Anyway, Signatory is a great company. I think Symington's done a lot with Edward Dower. I mean, I remember when it first came out in Canada, the whiskeys were pretty average. 15, 16 years later, a lot of the stuff we're getting from Edward Dower is phenomenal. And it's because he kind of went back to making a more old school style whiskey. But more importantly, I guess in the case with Edward Dower, is he started putting it in better wood. Edward Dower had been owned by Pernod Ricard. They were really just filling for like refill casks for not long-term maturation either. And Symington's really kind of turned the table on that. I think Edward Dower is one of the big sherried whiskeys out there that a lot of people go hunting for, these dark sherried whiskeys. But it's also true of Signatory. A lot of what Signatory bottles, a lot of the best sherried whiskeys we get come from Signatory, because he recognized well before most of the industry that that's what consumers were going to want, and that's the direction he should take things. So fascinating company. But let's get into this first one, Evan. If you want to toss that 44-year-old up on the screen. What's really cool here is we have two different casks that we can really try side by side. And what's cool about that is you've essentially got distillate from the same vintage, probably from like casks that were filled relatively close to one another. And we don't have that detail on here. I might have to go into Whiskey Base to find it, but I would suspect, these things were probably filled at close to, if not on the same date, matured for almost the exact same amount of time. And then you see there's quite a difference between the two of them, both in terms of color, but I expect also in terms of flavor profile. But, despite the fact that one of them is a little darker than the others, I've only nosed the first, and I'm already finding some things to love in this. It is soft, tropical, fruity. I can tell Kurt wants to chime in here. Harmony, what are you getting?
I get like a candle wax and some nice sweetness on fruits, and
it's got this nice like bakery pastry note to it. It reminds me of like bread and butter pudding right out of the oven. It's kind of fruity and savory, but a little sweet, and also maybe slightly undercooked dough, like kind of damp undercooked dough. Kurt?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
We're gonna have
You gotta turn that second phone off.
Can you hear me now?
That's a good call, Kurt.
Hear me now?
Do you have audio on two devices?
Okay. Don't worry about me. I'm gonna try type.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting some like underripe papaya, tropical tones, some nice melon notes as well. Sammy Samhuri saying root beer, which is a good note. Maybe a nice sarsaparilla. Well, more importantly, sorry, Harmony?
I was gonna say, Evan put in, he's getting a bit of parsnip and compost veggies, a little dunnage note.
I can
It's
see
very
the parsnip.
buttery. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of like, maybe a little bit of like cooked turnip. But yeah.
The nose
some
is
nice tones.
lovely. Like you could just focus in this for a while.
It's got that, I haven't used this for a while, but it's one of my favorites. It's got a carrot cake donut note. So deep fried carrot cake dough. If you've never had one of those, you should probably go to Jelly Modern on 8th Street in Calgary and get yourself a carrot cake donut. And while you're there, purchase one for me and drop it off at the shop, and I'll be very grateful. I don't allow myself to go there very often. They also make a great maple bacon donut too.
Right. I might get you a hookup. I bike by there every morning. Mhm.
Well, jumping ahead to the palate. Well, loads of caramel, like old English butterscotch ice cream. More of that bread and butter pudding right out of the oven. Like I'm getting raisins, and cinnamon buns with raisins, but like kind of again moist, really doughy, maybe slightly undercooked cinnamon raisin buns.
Yeah.
Jeff is apparently using his whiskey glasses as a bong these days, so that's interesting. Evan noting there's a different fill date on the two different 78s, though interestingly, the cask numbers, or I guess I got to look a little differently because it's not really the cask number, it's the ID. What are we looking for? Yeah, the cask numbers are a little ways apart, aren't they? And that's probably why one is 44 and one is 45 years of age. Thank you for that observation, Evan. Harmony, what are you getting on the palate?
It is really doughy, but I'm also getting like a vegetal note and a little bit of like that, like a wet wood pencil shaving kind of dunnage note that was mentioned earlier. That's really, that dryness is sticking around for me.
Someone, or who was it there? Was it someone commenting on, oh, sorry, Alec commenting, honestly, I got the turnip too. That's a new one. I get a little bit of the turnip too, or, reminds me of like a little bit of like mashed turnip in the holidays, that root vegetable. It is a musty dram. I mean, anyone who's been to Bunnahabhain knows that predominantly they've got, dunnage floor warehouses there. Most of what they've filled, or at least historically, a lot of what they filled were sherry butts, like large sherry butts that were often quite old. And so I'm not surprised we're getting like these mushroomy, earthy turnip kind of notes to it. But that's an interesting one. Well, why don't we jump on to the next one, the 45-year-old, just to see how they compare. I did see Sammy had a good note in their mint, and I do get a little bit of like a fresh minty note there too.
Kurt put in the chat, he's getting dill, soft fruits, bubblegum, and raw bun dough. Yeah.
It's my raw cinnamon bun, or slightly undercooked.
Yeah. the nose on this 45 is more muted than the younger one.
It is, but it's a little, it's still very soft, but it's a little richer to me. Like, and it might be my glass. I've got the old school blender's glass. To me, this is going more into that treacle, toffee.
Yeah.
Again, like I'm getting cinnamon buns again, but these ones are warm and they're thoroughly cooked. Yeah, like that classic sticky toffee pudding, a little bit of vanilla ice cream on the side.
A little bit of like orange marmalade and some citrus fruit jam.
Starting to go even into like a little bit of like mincemeat, but like proper mincemeat made with like animal fat, like suet. Really round coating. That's some nice sherry, like big rich fruits. Again, treacle, sticky toffee pudding, cinnamon buns. Lots of like kind of raisiny, grapey fruits to it. Kurt saying a little more generic than the 44.
Yeah, like if you were to describe an old sherry dram, it like this is kind of hitting all those notes.
Well, the sherry, that's the thing, is after 45 years, the sherry can overwhelm the spirit a little bit. So it's you can lose some of the subtleties in it. I mean, on the plus side, this is good sherry. It's rich, deep, and like this is an old school style sherried whiskey. I mean, you'd expect it to be. It's a sherry, but from 1978. You wouldn't expect that kind of modern speed season sherry. I don't know. I mean, it's fun to kind of think, but like, you know, who knows what kind of sherry cask this is? I mean, there are some similarities. It's not quite as tropical, but there's some similarities to this, to like some of those old Glendronics we used to see. Like specifically like 71, 72. And yeah, it's kind of fun. Don't get to try this kind of stuff very often anymore. But it's fun to go back to that 44 because the 44 obviously has a little bit more spirit character in there. It's probably slightly more tropical, and if only because the sherry is masking some of that in the 45.
Yeah, I agree with there's a lot happening in the chats that I agree with. And one of them I think that got the most response is that like orange peel rim of an old fashioned that's coming through tea notes, dried fruit, almost a hint of cola versus the sarsaparilla on the first one. And Kurt nailed it for me, this like slightly burnt fruit note. And it's even those burnt toffees and big dried fruit.
Well, that's the
palate is
classic
big.
mincemeat pie note for me then. Like you've got
Okay.
like cooked raisins, usually orange peel in there as well too. And if you cook it, like bake a pie, it's usually pre-cooked and then you warm it up in the pie crust. And you can sometimes burn a little bit of it. Like that's that for me, that's that classic, like proper mincemeat pie. None of this vegetarian mincemeat. I mean proper mincemeat. So, and by which I also mean delicious mincemeat.
Yeah, it's good.
Wow.
It's really nice.
Well, that's it, folks. That's the end of the tasting. I'm satisfied. I don't need to go.
Yeah.
Happily just have a glass of that and keep riffing all night. I'm kind of torn. I'm gonna be interested to see how those evolve over the course of the tasting because there's some things I like about that 44 better. Like the nose is more enticing, but I think I like the palate on the 45 better. It might not have the complexity, but it's like just the right weight of good sherry, good old school sherry, without being totally over the top. After this next whiskey, Jeff is out because things just aren't old enough. So, which is
Yeah.
totally fair. Evan's saying a touch of cognac on the 45. Apple notes veering off to a bit of acetone. Yeah, I'm more with Kurt. I think it's more Armagnac than cognac, but I don't know, maybe one of those like old Valentursigny cognacs as opposed to say, you know, a more traditional cognac. Well, Evan, do you want to toss the 1975 on there, the 48-year-old? So, I mean, probably need to address some realities, which is the fact that 3 of the 5 releases we saw from Signatory are from Bunnahabhain probably tells you that the pantry is not quite as full at Signatory as it once was. In fairness, I think we all knew to a certain extent that this was bound to happen. Here we have another Oloroso sherry butt, bottled at 50.2% from a single cask. And it looks like it was filled 28th of February, 75. Is that right? And bottled the 5th of October in 2023. Surprising that it took so long to get to us, but we certainly are glad that we did get some. You will know we have this on pre-order on the website because we are sold out of it, but we have 2 bottles arriving in January. So we will be getting this back eventually. But what do we think about this one, Harmony? This is a little different. This is more, I mean, it reminds me right off the bat. My mom used to make, we had a crabapple tree in our yard, and my mom used to make crabapple jelly. And it reminds me of going into the kitchen when she's like mashing the like boiled apples, and they're kind of, that musty fruit is sort of draining into her pot through,
That's cool.
through a cheesecloth.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like that same process that my grandma would do with like gooseberries and rhubarb. But yeah, it just lots of kind of musty fruit, lots of raisin, toffee, same kind of initial entry as the last one with the trickle toffee and
Again, you know, that cognac Armagnac note I think is a good one here.
Mm-hmm.
This one to me has got more kind of tart fruits, and more like kind of candied nuts, like beer nuts and like maple glazed almonds and walnuts.
Kurt, I love your notes for this. Maybe it's the Buckleys I had 30 minutes ago, but it really resonates.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some like the leather's a good call. This is also veering into like tobacco, like a bit of pipe tobacco, like a fruitier pipe tobacco on the nose. Oh. Evan's note about the Alberta Premium, the cast strength rise, I think applies to the palate, but I think that's just that big, spicy, almost over oaked profile. Again, applies to, you know, maybe some richer cognacs and some deeper Armagnacs, because it's definitely got that nice sort of sweet, almost sharp spice to it. You know, like the 45 again, I think we're veering into territory of things similar to those old Glendronachs. Although the interesting thing for me is here, I mean, the parallel for me would be more towards Macallan than Glendronach, like a good old school Macallan bottling, because it's got that richer, deeper, sort of a little bit heavier spirit. Raw licorice root, that's a good one. Loads of chocolate, like almost like raw cocoa, to riff off of Kurt's licorice note.
Yeah. It's like
Head and
big
shoulders for Tom
spicy.
Rand. Sorry, Harmony?
Sorry, I was just saying for me, the finish is like a very dry, very spicy wood. That's just like been like freshly like stained almost or lacquered, and that chemical kind of polish note really lingers for me.
Mhm. So the interesting thing about that is, again, I'm gonna wait. I'm not gonna pre-decide, but there was something I kind of prefer about the 45 over this because I find this is starting to veer towards like it's getting a little bit bitter on the back end, which to me is kind of spoiling the experience to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think that's what's getting me is like that bitterness that like Alec and you mentioned.
What's really good, but here, this is the reason I bring this up is because, I was just scanning on our site and Serge has this note here. It's always classy when ballers decide to release their whiskeys at ages like 48 or 49, rather than waiting to hit the 50-year mark, which might add 1,000 or more pounds to the bottle price. Fair, but maybe he also bottled it because he felt like it wasn't going to get better from leaving it in the cask for a couple more years. Because I think that's where we're at with this one, is I don't think time would have made this any better. If anything, it would have gotten a bit more bitter. Which is not to say, I mean, I haven't decided whether I think the 45 or the 48 is better, but of the two, the 48 is the one that's starting to show its age, and the 45 a lot less so.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to come back to them all and see how they change.
Evan says he loves that bittery note. Puts me in a happy place. Well, that's because you're a bourbon man, Evan. That's what you like, nothing but wood. Loads and loads of wood.
I like wood.
Jeff's 40, yeah. Jeff's 48 is gone, and that's stat, but I still have 45 and 44 left. Ain't that the truth? Well, lovely. Shall we continue on to what I believe is the youngest whiskey in tonight's range?
No, it's not. I
Is it
don't
not?
think.
Oh, that's right.
There's
We're
an
ending
18.
we're ending with the youngest. So it's the second youngest. All right. Braeval. I challenge anyone to say something exciting about Braeval. That may be
Uh,
a somewhat bold statement. If ever anyone wants to put any exciting Braeval facts into the chat. If I'm correct, Braeval was one of the last distilleries built in the 20th century. Kurt is right. It is also known as Braes of Glenlivet, but good God, I mean, that's somehow less interesting than Braeval.
I know. I was like, that's all we could come up with.
Yeah, founded 73, just before the big whiskey crash. But yeah, I don't think another distillery, I could be wrong, but I don't think another distillery opened after that until Aaron. I think that might be the last one. Has better marketing than Vikings. Well, interesting side note on this. We don't want to go too far down rabbit holes, but you all know I love going down rabbit holes. If anyone saw the exciting new release from Highland Park, where they're taking it back to their roots to get around the problem that their whiskey isn't selling without lowering their prices, then you know, yeah, there's no Vikings on it anymore, but they're just trying to revamp shit. They do look kind of old school, I have to say, but man, Highland Park is just treading water these days. So Braeval, no other Braeval facts, it doesn't look like. Jeff, fact check that Aaron nugget. Good. Look at that. I'm right. Braeval to Aaron. No new distilleries. But yeah, no Vikings. I don't think Braeval has any marketing. It's part of the Chivas Pernod Ricard group. Was created for blending. I do know this, it has no warehouses. And the reason for that is because in the 50s and 60s, most distilleries started moving to centralized warehousing if they hadn't already. And Chivas has a massive warehouse complex near Keith. And I think that's where they store the majority of their casks, including the ones that would come from Braeval. Anyway, Evan thinks ninjas should, I think, come from Braeval. But anyway, what do we think about this Braeval? 2000. We've seen a few of these. Some of them have been insanely dark. Like we had one a couple years back that was like almost so dark you couldn't see through it. If you're into that as a whiskey style, this one's a little bit more pale. And that is probably because it's from a refill sherry butt as opposed to a first fill. 21 years of age. And what's the ABV? 59.2. It's kind of a disappointment after the last three. Not because, well, I mean, it
Like it.
almost kind of has to be. That's the problem of following up a couple of 78s and a 75 Bunnahabhain with 2000 vintage Braeval.
I think the nose is nice. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's fine.
fresh. It's got some nice stone fruit, citrus fruits, honey, butter. I mean, it's not those big, bold sherry notes, but it's
It's it's just not old enough, Harmony. It's just not old enough. It's less than half the age of everything we've just tried.
all right. Well, Evan says the palate is better than the nose, so
All right.
maybe we
I'm
just
not saying
wait for it.
I have nothing bad to say about the palate. Or the
You
nose, sorry,
want
I haven't had the
good
palate.
good things you could say from the chat is fruit leather, uh,
Well,
funk
I would go
flowers,
more
and moist
fruit
tobacco,
roll up than fruit leather, but sure.
artificial fruit.
Yeah. Like kind of a berry flavored slushy.
Mm.
The nose is fine. It's just not exciting. Kurt, I don't know if you put any notes in there, but you said the nose was cool. Well, that yours was the fruit leather, new school sherry, but old school distillate. Okay, good comments.
Yeah.
Orange blossom from Sammy. All right, I'm gonna give it a taste.
Evan's going along with my vibes of the apricot peach juice and a bit of heat, something like ginger perhaps.
It definitely has some heat on the palate.
Oh yeah.
The ABV is showing through a little bit. It's not sharp, but it's very, very warm, toasty. Some of that could be coming from the wood too, but I think it's mostly from the ABV. This is a spice bomb to me. I mean, it's like a
Mhm.
Christmas spice market in the mouth.
I'm gonna add a couple drops of water and see if that helps because it is very spicy. It's like
Kurt said slightly Ben Rennis. I don't know. To me, it's not like farmy enough to be Ben Rennis or barnyardy enough.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of like your brown sugar. I don't know. Sort of. You mentioned butter on the nose, Harmony, like a maple butter kind of note to it on the palate. There's some nice fruit tones to it there. Honestly, I think my palate, it was just so utterly spoiled by the first three that I'm really struggling to get excited about this one, which is kind of sad because in any other tasting, this would probably be like a pretty
Yeah.
solid contender in the range.
I don't disagree with you. It really attacked my tongue.
Mm,
And it just instead of evolving into something more after, it just remained like hot and spicy. And I
yeah.
wasn't getting some of the notes that other people were saying in the chat.
Kin Envy doesn't count, but I'll take Speyside there, Jeff. That's fine. The distillery that should have been called something other than what they called it, because it's created nothing but confusion since then. But Kinninvie doesn't count because like William Grants didn't even tell people about it for like years. It was like a secret distillery. Even now, like they won't let you take photos if they show you it because they don't want it's basically just a shed, like an aluminum clad shed amongst like the I don't know, the not even the warehouse complex, like the machining complex of the William Grants compound. Um, Unless they've done something nice to it since I was last there. It's not a pretty distillery, but fact checked and disappointed, Jeff. Thanks for ruining the night.
Well, let's just call it a night. We
Yeah, that's
tried
it. It's all done.
before.
I'm turning
Yeah,
off this feed.
yeah. Jeff's just mad because we canceled the Halloween tasting that he was going to be in town for. So
Oh.
I think this is payback.
Well, you could have a tasting with Kurt. I don't know why I'm volunteering that. I have no authority to do so. But I'll be home handing out candy on Halloween. I'm almost certain, if anyone comes. Any other thoughts on the Braeval? I mean, it's fine. It's not bad. It's not Ben Rinnes. I think that's something positive we can say about it. Which is not to say I've not had some good Ben Rinnes. I have, but young Ben Rinnes, no bueno. All
It's
right.
very oaky and spicy, and I'm surprised that that's all I'm getting from the palate.
If anyone does, all joking aside, come trick or treating at my house, I will pour you a dram. So let that be known. Also, if you don't know where I live, I'm probably not going to tell you, but if you do know where I live and you come to my door, reluctantly or not, I will pour you a dram. Evan, let's get that Highland Park up on. I think we better move on. I don't even have Johnny Walker Red.
Good. That was a test,
It
I
was a
think,
test.
and you
It passed.
passed.
I mean, I could buy a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, but why?
Why?
It's not to say it's fine for what it is, but
Yeah.
I have more than a lifetime supply of whiskey. Don't need to acquire anything from JW and Sons. All right, 1991 vintage Highland Park, 32-year-old, first fill Oloroso sherry, 53.4%. This is another one of those anniversary releases. We have one or two of these left in stock. I believe that is it. So let's dive in on this. Whiskey Fun seemed to like this one, 91 points. Maybe it's my glass, but I'm getting kind of like I don't know if this is a thing, but like curdled caramel on the nose. Or maybe, what do you make? What is it? Like dulce de leche, which I believe is made from milk. If you could somehow curdle your dulce de leche a little bit, I think that's what I'd be getting on the nose. It's got a nice honey tone to it, little faint whiff of smoke.
Okay, Evan, thank God you said bacon because I was getting bacon, but it's not fair because Tony started cooking bacon, so he has no respect for these tastings.
Eggnog is a good call too. And I noticed that eggnog, they've been selling it in the store since like early September.
That's crazy. My initial note was like burnt buttered popcorn.
Maybe slightly burnt caramel corn.
Sure. Yeah.
Kurt's got sulfur and burnt tires.
So like a birthday party at a Fast and Furious race. Oh, it's very like, yeah, Jeff, like soy sauce and
It is definitely veering
salty.
in the direction of the dreaded S word, but I'm not prepared to call it that. Like for me, well, I don't know. There's definitely like a little bit of gun smoke on there, which personally I don't mind. Um, but yeah, that's an interesting one because I don't know. I definitely didn't get anything like that on the nose.
Mm,
Mm,
yeah, it's a little bit there.
It's
And I'm only saying it because I don't necessarily have a way of identifying sulfur all of the time. It's just a taste I don't like. And then every time I talk to people, they tell me that it's sulfur. But I
well,
don't necessarily identify it the same way, but it's definitely got a burnt note to it.
yeah, there's at the very least some burnt sugar, a little bit of, as I said, gun smoke, or maybe like a struck match, but mm, yeah, it's got that. I mean, and it's not the first time we've seen this. Like Macallan, Highland Park, Glenrothes at one point in time. All the whiskeys were coming from, or all the casks were coming from the same place. And it does have that note that makes me think of kind of Glenrothes on it, which is probably the whiskey I've seen more sulfur from than anything else. But
Kind of reminds me of some of those Bladnoch sulfured casks that we got last year.
hmm,
But most of those were weird red wine. Soupy and hoisin-esque, yeah.
yeah. All right. I don't love this one. I'm gonna come out and say it. I'm a little disappointed by this one, to be honest.
Thought you were reading my chat.
I'm hoping that it'll come around with a bit of time. Um, while we've been kind of just droning on about this, uh, I did look. Serge's notes definitely talk about sauternes and sulfur, pickled gherkins.
Mhm.
I don't know. He still found enough in this to give it a 91, which is a little surprising. I want to give this one some time and come back to it because I think I'm struggling with this a lot more than that. Sammy's saying no heathery floral notes for me. This HP is definitely HP sauce. Yeah, I don't know if it's even the sherry, man. Yeah. This was not the best sherry cask that they put this one into. It's kind of too bad. It's not terrible, but it's just, I don't know that I would score this. I definitely would not score this above 90. It would probably be mid 80s. So,
Mhm.
but let's
Sometimes
see.
I wish that these reviewers would put down their like meals of the day and how many cups of coffee they had. And I
And
wonder
I'm
if
not
that
going
would
to point
change.
fingers here, how many cigarettes they smoked. True
Fair
story.
enough.
Um,
Exactly.
but not that I'm judging people for smoking cigarettes, but
But
those aren't exactly kind on your palate. Um, anyway, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. And anyway, I think it's at this point that I should ask Evan to put the Mortlach 1991 up on screen. Marlboros and half a hoagie. Just that idea makes me sick somehow. Can smell, it's like the hoagies somehow, like one of them fell into the sandwich while it was being made.
like you ashed it in there.
Yeah. So 32-year-old Mortlach, first fill Oloroso sherry bud, but quite pale, 54.1%. Got some decent scores too. Uh, we don't see a lot of old Mortlach like this anymore, so this is kind of fun. And based on
No,
the color,
definitely
a
not.
bit more hopefully a bit more distillate in it. But I mean, that is an unusual sherry cask color to get for 32 years. I'm gonna guess without knowing this is probably American oak sherry, like just based on the time and the color. And possibly even the nose.
Like this one like has a little bit of like that sweet barley sweet grain note on the nose, which is really nice.
I mean, the funny thing is like you can get that little bit of like a beefy, leathery, meaty Mortlach note on it, but it's not like a raw in your face note. It's a bit more subtle.
Miss the last one.
Custard and like soft fruits, grapes like apple, pear.
Banana chips. That's what Evan's saying there.
Excuse me.
And
I love
Kurt
how
said,
Kurt put Lucky Charms in there. I could not tell you what Lucky Charms smell like, but I will say this does smell like children's cereal with milk in it, like an overtly children's cereal.
like sugar and milk.
Okay. All right. I think I've almost over Mortlicked my nose. I'm gonna have to go blow it. I'll be back in a second. It's all yours,
Over
Harvey.
Mortlock. Hmm. feel like the nose is just a lot more appealing than the last two. At least for me, I did not enjoy that Highland Park either. All right, let's try it.
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting Mortlach. I mean, very creamy, really bright
Mhm.
fruit, almost a little bit on the tangy side, and fresh. There's like this wet leaf litter kind of mustiness to it, but
Yeah.
overall, this is like a really bright, fresh, and vibrant Mortlach. We're 32 years in first fill sherry. I would expect this to be really dark and brooding, and it is none of that.
No, it's quite lovely.
I would say this has got to be American oak sherry too. Like there's like some little bits of honey and vanilla
Spicy.
in there. Reminds me of like Quaker Harvest Crunch with apple chunks on the palate.
And maybe bananas, because banana chips has been going around the chat now that Evan has said it. Kurt can't unsmell it. He's asking, do you get banana chips?
I could see that
Apple
on the
chunk?
nose, maybe not so much on the palate. Um, yeah, here's an intriguing, interesting thought about this. I mean, it's I think this has got to be American oak sherry, but based on the color and first fill in 32 years, like I have not seen many 32-year-old first fill sherry whiskeys with this
Is it
color.
first fill?
It's first fill.
That's
Evan,
hard to believe.
can you confirm? I think the label was there. It's on
Yeah, it
their
says
website.
first fill. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
I was drinking it thinking it's got to be fourth fill. Like,
just putting it back up there. Yeah. First fill Oloroso. Unless that's a typo. Um, that's kind of intriguing. I mean, this is the only company that we've seen first fill 30 plus year old sherry that's this pale is Gordon MacPhail. And it's because of their own casks. Like this, I don't know, maybe this is like an old sherry transfer cask, didn't have as much like wood notes, sherry notes to impart on the spirit. Anyway,
Sammy
no,
says they
no.
actually dumped the sherry out versus
Well,
other
they,
cats.
I would say it's almost certain this was not a wet fill sherry cask. That's for
Absolutely.
Jeff says it's from a barrel named Sherry. George Grant would have corrected you. He would have said a cask or a butt. But either way, a butt named Sherry would be the good name for a song. It would require some explaining, but yeah, that's interesting. That is, I think, the most surprising whiskey so far for me in the entire lineup tonight. Let's move on to the Speyside Bracket M. Can anyone name any Speyside distilleries that start with the letter M? Can you name more than one? That was actually a trick question. You don't have to answer that. There are two. We just had one. There's actually a couple. It would be hilarious if there was only one Speyside M distillery and they put M on there, but still, I think everyone knows who they're referring to when we refer to M. Uh, it's got that dark, meaty, leathery, earthy, tobacco chocolate nose to it. Um, it's almost tarry. Evan's popping this up on screen. So for those who haven't seen this, I believe we have 6 bottles arriving tomorrow. We usually get a dozen or more of these every couple of weeks, or sorry, every 6 months or so. They're often from a unique cask, but the interesting thing there is that I believe this is a parcel of sherried Macallan that Andrew Symington and Signatory bought in bulk, and then probably it was stock that had been married together and put back into casks, and then they acquired those casks. They have both Orkney and Speyside 18-year-old. They've been releasing quite a bit of this over the last little while, and it's been very consistent, which is why, again, my suspicion is that this is whiskey that's been vatted, put into casks to marry, which is quite common, and to continue maturing. But the numbers are also unusual, and it also gets to a topic that I like to riff on every once in a while. That is essentially that I don't believe Macallan is selling all the 18-year-old Macallan that they have, because I don't think they can. I think they've priced it so high that they've killed off their demand. They're probably happy with that they are selling and the prices they're getting, but they need an outlet for this stuff because they can't just keep it forever. And my suspicion is that's why companies like Signatory are getting parcels of this mystery Speyside single malt where there's not really any mystery. But yeah, the nose on this is good. It's deep, it's rich, it's a very dark nose. And it is, I'd say this is kind of a very good, dark, new school style sherry. Let's see what the palate is like.
Oh, it's like thick and heavy and tons of like
It is,
coffee and dark chocolate, cocoa.
it is so thick.
Mm.
To be honest, when Evan told me the lineup, I was like, really? This is at the end? But that was in the end, that was a really good call. This is a beast of a whiskey. This is big, intense. As you said, it's really thick, Harmony. Like the palate on this is like a syrup. Like it is so
Yeah.
thick.
Yeah.
It's sweet, dark fruits, chocolate, spices. It's a great whiskey. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This has got a lot of nice things you can say about it, but it's not very distillate driven. This is just a lot of sherry cask. It is
Yeah.
lots of sherry. It's
Yeah.
good sherry, but it's more sherry than whiskey to me on the palate.
It is. It's definitely gone into that sweet but not too sweet sherry, where you can still identify it as whiskey, where sometimes the sherry for me becomes so overwhelming that it's it's less whiskey than spirit.
Yeah, the palate is so dark. Moving towards like cloves, fennel, anise, like really woody spices. I don't, it's
Mm.
I don't know that I could have more than 1 dram of that a night. I think that's like
That would be tough.
yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I think there's
And
people for whom this is what they want. But I mean, I would love to put this up against 43% Highland or Macallan 18 just to see how it held up. Like, I mean, I think it's good. I just think it's almost over the top for me.
yeah, it's the finish is going into that like spicy ginger note for me,
Yeah.
but still along that like dark chocolate, wood, even like those kind of not leather, but the tobacco and
Mhm. Well, there's a market out there. Like there's people that like this style, and yeah, I'm gonna pass on this. I mean, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of other things I would drink over this for the price. I mean, $400, sherried Macallan, the price at cask strength, the price isn't bad. But I don't know. I mean, we've had some stuff over the last year. I would take our Ardmore cask over this in a heartbeat. I would take, I think some of you like our Glen Talker's 2000 cask more than I do. I like it, but I don't like it as much as the Ardmore. I would take that over this. I might even take our Glenfarclas 15 over this. Like this is just, it's so
Mhm.
big and rich and towards those dark wood spices that that's where it's too much for me.
Yeah. I was thinking that I feel like the only way I could drink a proper pour of this was to have it on the side of like a vanilla ice cream just to counter.
This would be a great dessert dram.
Yeah.
It's good. I guess this is where personal taste and
Hmm.
I recognize this is really good. It's just not my personal taste. So,
Hmm.
but then if we all had the same taste, that would also be pretty boring.
Evan does have a good point that ballers do add ice to their Macallan, so maybe we're just not adding enough ice to this
Mhm.
sample. I did add water just for the second pass. I don't think it needs it, but it does have some heat, so I added a drop to my last four to see if it changes
Sammy made a
anything
good
for
note.
me.
This would be good to pair with cigars.
Yeah,
As someone who only infrequently smokes cigars, again, because I find they're so hard on my palate. Um, I agree. This would probably be a good cigar pairing whiskey because it would stand up to it for
absolutely.
sure. All right, speed round time. Since Kurt's got some janky audio connection, Evan, you gonna join us for the speed round?
Sure.
All right. I do, and while we're talking on that, I did want to see if there was any comments on Facebook. There aren't, but there are 5 people watching, which is impressive. Anyway, we're going back. We're going back to the Bunnahabhain 7844 year.
Pickles.
What did you say?
Pickles.
Pickles. Like
Oh,
pickled
cool.
brine.
I was gonna when I thought you said Skittles, and I was gonna be like, damn, bang on. This is like opening a bag of Skittles,
Oh, this
which
is
is
like
a 46-year-old man I don't do very often.
this is like
Yep.
bread and butter pickles, but just like the dill is still there. Like
Nice. I get more like this is opening up the wrapper on a Mr. Big bar. Like it's got the peanuts and chocolate and the nougat notes in there too.
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
still stuck on the Skittles. I'm just all these little bright little fruits or Jelly
Yeah.
Bellies.
Um,
Mhm.
Well,
Palate.
big deal on the palate. Tom says baked banana bread, and I think that's a good call too.
mhm.
Shout out to Jeff who brought not one but 2 banana breads in his suitcase. I don't know if where we're standing on this, Jeff, but I mean, there was talk of a banana bread of the month club at one point in time. Um,
That was
just
month one. He was
just
there.
kidding.
That's where it came
Um,
from.
but that was insane and amusing that a couple of different banana breads showed up. All right, guys, comments on the palate. I mean, palate's fine. I don't think it's as interesting as the nose, but it's a good whiskey.
I like that dill note. And Sammy's getting the pickle juice there too.
Yeah, so was Kurt,
Nicely.
and I appreciate that because I
Mhm.
thought I was going crazy.
It's
That's exactly what it is.
it's a 44-year-old Ardena Gherkin, apparently.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
having tried the Ardena Gherkin, I can tell you that it's nothing like it because the Ardena Gherkin was almost like concentrated, like offensively over the top pickle juice. I think Sean tried it in London. We both tried it at the whiskey show in London. All
Crazy.
right, on to the 45-year-old, still from 1978.
I think there's a bit more of that musty old Bunnahabhain coming through, but the sherry is still trying to strangle it.
Strangle.
To me, this is mincemeat. Eat more, like chocolate
Eat more.
bars.
Charleston Chew.
Kurt said some tropicals, mandarin juice, oils.
The palate on this is like those early 70s Glendronachs. It's this really soft, syrupy style of sherry, little bit of tropical fruit, chocolate and leather. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm biased, but and it's not the vintage, but I love those old 70s, early 70s Glendronachs, and that's where I'm stuck at with this one. It's not as complex as our 72 cask that we did, but it's a pretty bloody good old sherry whiskey.
it doesn't quite have the same viscosity that the old Glendronachs had, and that salty and touch of saltiness that it has just makes it a bit more uplifting for me.
Were those older Glendronachs like a higher ABV though, or were
No,
they
I think they were all like like a lot of them were like mid to high, like sorry, they were around 50, like high 40s or low 50s for
Yeah,
like the
because like the
72s.
first two is 40% and 42%, and that could definitely play into it. However, I know they're not watering it down, but
No.
it's sat for a long time.
They've definitely oxidized.
Yeah.
In the case of the sad thing is like the 44 to me, like there's almost like something that fell flat in it because, given the sherry's not as dominant, I would have expected a much more tropical profile than it has. And there's shades of that in the 45. They're just lying underneath sherry. And that's why for me it kind of stands out. Anyway, we're stuck in the mud here because we're not speeding through round two. Back to the 75, guys. Evan, you want to riff on that?
Yeah, it still has a bit of that orange rind on a garnish on an old fashioned for me, but it's got a little bit of jelly beans in there too.
No. Harmony?
It's got a little bit of like Peeps marshmallow candy and those like I don't like them, but those banana
Hmm.
squishy candies as well.
I have never had a Peeps in my life.
You just have to smell it. That's the smell.
I'm pretty sure I put one of those in the microwave for my daughter at some point in time. The palate on this, the nose on this, it's good. It's just a little, I think it's slightly over the hill.
Oh, it's so oaky and dry.
Yeah, it goes bitter on the finish, but there's something like very Amaro-esque about that bitterness that I really like.
Well, I mean, having had the opportunity to try some kind of baller whiskeys over the years, it reminds me a little bit, although I actually like this better than the second edition of the Macallan Leak, which was a 55-year-old. And the 50-year-old Leak, which was the first release, which was stunning, old school sherry, very vibrant, was great. And then the 55 came out and it was so bitter. Like it was over oaked. It spent too much time in wood. And it was such a contrast. This is kind of halfway between that. It's not so over the hill and bitter, but it's going in that direction. And yeah, I'm out on it. So Kurt says some tropicals, mandarin juice, oils, I think, unless that was from the last one.
Yeah, he's got deeper syrup notes, old sherry malts, chocolate dip pretzels on this one.
Chocolate dip pretzels. That's a good note.
Yeah.
And Buckley's again. Kurt, do you find it comforting to find Buckley's in whiskey or not so much? Not so
No,
much. Yeah.
he's paranoid. He's like, it's flu season. Get that away from me.
So back in the day before Hunter, when I was the only whiskey guy in the shop, the tastings had to go on whether I was feeling well or not. And I got used to taking swigs of Buckley's in between like whiskeys when I was guiding tastings because there was literally no one else to do it. I don't know that you could do that nowadays. I think in the post-COVID era, people would be like, "Why are you here?" But anyway,
I think
it was a different time.
Snoop Dogg used to call that scissorp, didn't he?
You called that what? Scissoring?
Scissorp.
Scissor.
Yeah.
I'm not cool enough to. That one's over my head, Evan. Harmony, any other comments on that, or are we moving on to the Braeval?
Let's move on to the Braeval.
Yeah. Once again, the Braeval's nose is fine, but it's suffering from association with the first three.
It's like a pancake syrup coated Weetabix.
Okay.
Interesting. I'm getting like a little bit of like porridgey pine syrup,
Yeah.
pine
Mhm.
resin almost.
Evan, I'm gonna add on and complicate your description by saying it's like flapjacks, so cheap ass pancakes with margarine and Aunt Jemima on it. Are we allowed to call it Aunt Jemima anymore or not? Or is that just
No.
pancake syrup?
Yeah, it's
Pancake.
like old Pearl Mill, which makes even less sense now. It
Which
is
was
very
her
much
first
this is like a really good IHOP jam, I would say.
I think that margarine note is bang on.
The palate's improved for me on this. Like
It has.
it's fruity, it's vibrant. I like it. It's got a nice creaminess to it, but it's definitely got something that I know is not butter because I know what butter tastes like. And it's got
Yeah.
that I can't believe I'm not eating butter taste. But
But you believe it.
but then I know. I mean, when I say I can't believe, I'm disappointed that I'm not eating actual butter. I'm eating margarine instead. So, uh, Highland Park 91.
It's still overcooked.
Well, yeah,
Oh, it's awful. I'm sorry. I mean, we have to sell these. Um,
It's chocolate coated bacon bits now, like those iodized bacon bits.
like I was gonna say the chemical bacon
Yeah.
bits.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you also have like burning oil on your engine exhaust.
Mhm.
it smells like overcooked maple glazed pork belly.
Oh,
It's whatever it is. Like I really like the nose, but it should come with a Surgeon General's wording on the bottle.
for everybody, not just pregnant people,
Yeah, may cause cancer, etc.
like melted plastic.
I like the palate better now than I did the first time around, but it's a little wild. It's a little, meaty. There's
It is
definitely that
meaty.
sulfury tone. There's like, I know someone made the comment about burlap. This is like a wet, like a moldy burlap sack from a dunnage warehouse. The palate's interesting, but to me, this is not a 1200 or whatever this is dollar whiskey. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
it.
So like
It's
when we first went through this, I wanted to say like gas station meat stick, but I didn't because it's supposed to be classy and expensive. But now that we've had it sitting here, it's like you left the wrapper on that meat stick and lit it on fire.
Is that a Slim
it's
Jim?
got
Hmm.
is it a Slim Jim?
Maybe.
Maybe they made the mistake of not taking the Slim Jim out of the wrapper before they put it on that conveyor system that keeps heating it.
Yeah, like, oh man.
So Kurt says the socks off one of the local urban outdoorsmen, lit it on fire, and doused it in 2 buck chuck and beaten with a teriyaki beef jerky sticks. I like that one.
What's a 2-buck check?
2 buck chuck is a cheap ass wine from Charles Shaw that's sold in Trader Joe's in the US.
Okay.
It's also not
Yeah.
$2 anymore, I don't think. But
Yeah, inflation.
8 bucks.
But to me, it's like you took it's got the apple pie notes that I get on a lot of Highland Park, but it's also got like this bacon loaded quiche note, and it's like you took both and put it in a blender, and you're just getting everything all at once.
here's a fun game. If you were to guess blindly which distillery this whiskey was from, what would you guess?
I think a lot of people will say Lecheg, but
I was
I still get the
actually
Highland Park on it.
I was gonna go Ardmore. I
It's
could
not
see
farming
Ardmore.
enough for Ardmore, I don't think.
It's too what?
It's not farmy enough. Like there's too much chemical for me for it to be
Mhm.
Ardmore. Like Ardmore is like a natural farmy funk, but Lecheg's a really good guess. I think people could come up with that. It's just
I don't know. There's something about this one that I quite like. Probably the
shocking.
Lechegginess of it or the
I was just
Ardmoreness
Well,
of it.
Evan, it's
We
that
should really talk to Ian Snow about this one, I think is what I'm coming to.
Evan,
Yeah.
it's like that sort of whiff of poo where you should be
No,
grossed out by it, but somehow you just can't stop smelling it. Like
it's not.
that's kind of what this tastes like. It's like you don't
You
think you
spend too
like
much time
it,
with
but
your
it's not
dog.
so offensive
Yeah.
that you're gonna stop.
Yeah.
That's wrong on every level.
Anyone who's
I
changed
get
a
where you're
child's
going with
diaper
that, but
knows what
it's
I'm talking about.
yeah,
So
it's just
These
not
78ers are weird.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. All
this
right,
is like
let's move on to
it's
the
more
mort.
chemical cleaner than chemical funk, I think is what it is.
Oh man,
Yeah.
this Mortlach is now even more fun on the nose than it was the first time around. This has opened up really nicely. So much leather, again, like kind of wild fermented fruit. Even like a little bit of a cheesiness. It reminds me of like, this is what it must smell like in like the countryside in France right at harvest. They've got some blocks of cheese out there carving. There's some grapes and fresh fruit.
I can picture that. Like tall wheat in the background, bowls
Mm.
of fruit, bottles of wine.
It's definitely getting a bit meatier as time goes on.
I think it's opened up really nicely.
Hmm.
Well, I'm digging the palate on this too. Um, yeah.
Yeah, this is
It's
like,
got some nice, like sour stone fruit. I think Kurt, you said like sour wine gums, and I'm getting that here.
it's elegant worm tub whiskey.
You know
More
that
Craig than Mortlach. Yeah,
Kurt,
uh,
the Craig Yellicky comment I think is a good one.
yeah, it is. And I think it's partly due to that cask. Like it's
Mhm.
kind of a confusing cask. Like you said, Andrew, it must be American oak.
And the funny thing with this one is like, I mean, I guess to go back to Serge's comment on the Bunnahabhain 75, like good on them for bottling this at 32. The funny thing is I think they could have left this one a lot longer and it would have
Mhm.
continued to just esterify, and this could have been like a tropical fruit bomb in another 5 to 10 years. That said, it's lovely. I didn't think I would like it more than the Highland Park, but I definitely like it more than the Highland Park. It might even be an edge above that 44 Buna. Um, that's an interesting one. It's a surprise for me. All right.
I I have a randomly weird question. Signatories Diageo, yes? No?
Nope, they're
What is it?
independent.
They're independent?
Yeah.
Or
Or
are
are
you
they
talking about Mortlock?
Oh, Mortlack's
uh,
Diageo.
but Signatories not?
Signatory's
No.
owned by a chap named Andrew Symington. Evan, you can put his photo up again. I'm just
Oh
kidding.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
gotta find
remember the
it.
photo.
Yeah.
Um, I just think it's really interesting that like we've tried that Diageo special release Mortlock, which I found just unappealing and overpriced. And then you get something like this, which for its age is wonderful and evolves nicely. And as you say, could probably have sat for much longer. And I still think would be worth its value versus what Diageo is putting out as the distillery
But
owners.
again, I think that's in large part because, you know, he's putting out a single cask. They're trying to putting out a batch
Yeah.
bottling.
Really?
Diageo never, I don't think before 10 years ago, Diageo even thought there was any value in promoting Signatory, or sorry, Mortlach as a brand. It's only really been in the last, 7 or 8 years that they've been like, oh, wait, people are interested in this. We could probably make some money
Yeah.
on this. We could turn, well, they tried. We can turn Mortlach into the next Macallan. And they tried, and it was a huge failure. Um,
Yeah.
but I think part of that is that they never thought to hold stocks that long. So like the stocks they have are coincidental, or maybe they're ones that they
Mhm.
purchased back, as opposed to ones like this from Signatory where they know what the liquid's like because they're monitoring their casks. They're cautious about everything they buy, and they're trying to bottle it at the right time. And I think uh that's a huge difference between the two
Yeah.
whiskeys.
I would just think that even if you were doing a blend of various vatings of casks, you could come up with something better for the price than what they bottled in the 2023 release. My opinion. It's my
Well,
opinion.
probably, but I think they're trying to appeal to and they're trying to be cool and relevant and edgy and experimental. And
I
I mean
think they're
even
just trying to appeal to the size of people's wallets, and it has nothing to do with palates.
yeah. Yeah,
Good
there
call.
is some fairness in that comment. There's something to be said there. I think I'm
Sorry.
almost
I'm
there. I'm
sorry.
just trying to scroll through to Evan and my trip to Scotland because there's a photo in here I was hoping to show if I can find it.
Well, while you're talking about that, for me, Harmony, I think especially like comparing this to the NAS Mortlach that we had in the Diageo one, and I'm hoping that the next one is better. But there's so much marketing involved that they're just tripping over themselves to create
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
without whiskey people actually being involved. And I really think that NAS Mortlach was like the emperor's new clothes of whiskey, where it was just like everybody convinced themselves like it's got to be good, and then they released it, and it's just like one of the most weirdest, most boring whiskeys I could get for $400, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, and then you think of that dollar value and you move into this next one, and it's like, well, I'll buy that and have money to spare. Like,
Yeah. Well, on that note, Kurt was really big on this one. I still like it. It's settled down. I don't know. I don't think you made it in reference to this one, Evan, but this reminds me of like old bottlings of like Thomas Handy, uh, or like
Are you talking about the Macallan or the Mortlach?
the
the
Macallan.
Macallan.
Nice.
Sorry, I've already moved on to I'm trying to
Yeah.
roll this thing up into a tight little package. I'm onto the Macallan. It reminds me of like antique collection Buffalo Trace whiskeys on the nose.
Cool. It's still for me like it's this Welch's red grape juice reduction. Like it's just so much grape juice on there, and even into like the purple grape tang notes.
It's oh man, it's so much on the like it's Hubba Bubba meets like somebody
Mhm.
like mandolin grating spices into your mouth while you're lying on your back. I mean, this is scotch for a bourbon lover. This is scotch for people who like to be choked by their oak. Um,
Yeah.
Oh,
and it's fine. It's not over the top, or it's not bitter over the top, but it's just too much wood for me on this one.
It's the East India Trading Company's single cask Macallan.
are you getting like big time over steep tea?
Yeah.
Kurt saying getting even better on the nose for me. Well, you know
The
what?
nose is fantastic.
The nose is good. The palate's too much for me, but that's fine. We won't say that. Before we go to a vote, and I'm sure Evan's got a vote set up probably. Um, I'm just going to quickly share some photos from Evan and my trip in 2019 to Signatory, well, technically to Edward. And because I'm not good at cataloging my photos and keeping track of them, I have to do it on my Instagram page. But imagine yourself first thing in the morning at this beautiful, idyllic distillery in the hills above Pitlochry, and then the owner of the joint barges past you in his forklift, driving casks to the warehouse, because that's really what he likes to do. And that's also why he got rid of the tourists, because they were getting in the way of his forklift and moving things about his complex. This is where Signatory is based today at the Edward Distillery. It's a beautiful distillery. It is sad that it's no longer open to the public. I hope they will reopen it for, industry as well as, enthusiasts that are maybe willing to pay to visit it, because it is a beautiful distillery, and an awesome joint. But that gentleman next to me there in the photo is Andrew Symington, the owner. We had to stop him working in order to get a photo with him. But he is quite a nice guy. He's built an incredible business. I think part of the reason why he sold it is that he is getting, he's approaching the end of his career. He's probably not going to be there much longer, but it's pretty incredible that, as an independent businessman, a small businessman, he was able to hold on to and bottle some stuff like this. We've had a load of incredible bottlings from Signatory over the years, and it is testament to what he built that they put together. The 30th anniversary releases were really sensational. The 35th, I think, as I mentioned before, I don't think the pantry's quite as full now as it was back then, but they still managed to put out some pretty cool casks and a Highland Park. And it was kind of a fun range. Evan, should we fire
Well,
up the poll?
yeah. Well, while you're doing that, because I don't think I could.
Oh,
Oh, maybe I
oh,
could
I need to
trigger it
do it
here.
now.
Yeah, you do.
Oh,
Um, Oh, no, I got it.
I
There's
can
only
do
two
Well,
questions.
Yeah, I didn't do a third on this one. I was a bit tired. But I think the cool thing about Signatory too is like maybe their stock of the older stuff is getting long in the teeth for some of them and need to be bottled and that's why we're not seeing as much of it. But it seems like they're probably the maybe next to Gordon MacPhail, but maybe even more than Gordon MacPhail. They are the independent bottler to go to for like uh early 10-year-old to mid-teen to early 20s sherry casks right now.
Yeah, they've got
They
some
just
great
have a
value.
fantastic amount of sherry casks and a lot of them that they bottle at high proof, like we saw in the 100 proof series that we did too.
Mhm. All right, while people are voting, um, ladies first, maybe we'll start with you, Harmony. Do you have your top three selected?
No.
No. All right, Evan, are you prepared to go?
Uh, yeah, I'll pull something out. I
Bring it.
am going to say the probably counter to everybody else. My first favorite is the 1975 Bunnahabhain. Which I did really enjoy, although I'm not the big sherry guy right now. I just love that bitterness, that teetering on the edge style that it has. And for the same reason, even though it's not something I could drink on a daily basis, that Highland Park is just there's something about it that just keeps me going back for it.
It's that little whiff of poo, Evan. You just can't.
No.
That's right. That's right.
It's not enough to turn you off, but it's just enough to keep you enticed.
Yeah.
Okay, Harmony, how about now?
Okay, I'm getting closer. Um, Buna, the 48 year, I think is my favorite.
Mm,
And then my second favorite is probably the Speyside M, maybe, or the Mortlach. They're both good.
okay.
Eh,
All right, I've narrowed it. I've narrowed down it down to three. I just don't remember. I don't know what order they're in yet.
I know, right? I just did not, I can't get past the pickles on the 44.
So I'm gonna go 45, the 1978 45.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go the 1970, sorry, the 1978 45, the 1975 48. That's confusing. And the Mortlach 91 is my third.
Cool.
I like the Speyside M. It's too much for me. It's too
Mhm.
much clove, too much dark spice. Um, but yeah, for me, I think I think the 45 is a standout. So, well, let's see what people think. I don't think they're going to agree with me tonight, but Evan, are we ready to share the poll?
All right.
Yeah. Fire away.
All right. Do I need to share that or are you sharing that?
I will see if I can find it. It's kind of disappeared from my
Here.
screen here.
No,
If I
get
end it,
QR
will it
code.
share?
I don't see, oh, I have to end it first.
You have
Got
to
it.
end it. Yeah, there you go. Now share.
I feel like I'm out of touch on this. I haven't done this in a while. So there we
Well,
go.
you know-
Round one. The 78-45
Ooh.
narrowly edges out the 75. The Mortlach comes in third. I'm feeling pretty pumped about that. My top three are the top three whiskeys in round one.
Nice.
Round
Ditto.
two, the Mortlach and the Speyside M come through, and the 75 edges in there. I think everything but the Braeval and the Highland Park got a vote.
Yeah.
Um,
I can understand the Highland Park, but I think the Braeval, it's a bit too bad. Again, I think it's a pretty darn good dram. It
I think
just
it's
gets lost in the
too,
lineup
I think it's just a delicate dram for this lineup
big
yeah,
in
time.
comparison.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's probably just it's a little bit out of its depth in this lineup.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, and it would have made a more expensive tasting, and therefore we probably would have had fewer people partaking in it. But I mean, one thing we could potentially have done is put that 1968 Bunnahabhain in this lineup, and it would have been interesting because I think we still have a couple bottles of that kicking around.
Mhm.
But that would have dramatically increased the price of the tasting and probably made it not cost
Maybe we have to do. I mean, you did it a few, like last year or the year before, but another crazy old Bunnahabhain tasting.
It's possible, but probably not. There's other things to do. There's other ideas to
Yeah.
be explored.
Braeval tasting. We could do an all Braeval tasting.
oh my
And then
God.
only Steve will show up.
It's literally the tasting no one asked for, is an
That's
all
right.
Braeval tasting.
From the distillery, no one asked for.
Yeah, yeah. Anything we should add before we wrap up here, crew?
If you're in town November 7th or 21st, come to our whiskey festival. We still have some space, and as you mentioned, it's your last chance tomorrow for the early bird for our not whiskey festival. So
I mean,
I'd say
Or
those are
not
the big
whiskey,
ones.
not
this is
not
whiskey
whiskey.
calendar,
Advent
advent calendar
calendar.
tasting.
So
The not thing. Yeah.
it effectively is an advent calendar, but it's
It's
just
not.
tastings.
It just doesn't have the windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all kidding aside, I think the lineup is as good as or better than last year's lineup. Like
Oh, it definitely is.
Evan and I, we really took this into account this year. Our packaging costs went down a little bit, so we were able to bump the bottles up a bit. I don't think people will be disappointed. And for anyone who did Uber, I still have to talk to Evan about this. There might be an Uber offering for 2025 in the winter, but I'm just saying, I'm just speaking out of turn right now for now. But there might be an announcement.
Yeah, maybe we should start like the Ides of March Uber calendar or something like that.
Ooh. Well, or the 12-day, the Ides of March, 15 days of Rome or something like that. I don't know. We'll
Yeah.
come up with some like really ridiculous premise, but there will be something in the new year where we're going to do something like last year's Uber calendar, but it won't be a calendar, it will be a tasting. But it'll
Or a series of tastings.
or a series of tastings that can be condensed into a cube that resembles a calendar but is not. So you never know. You never know. Lots to stay tuned. Anyway, thank you everyone for taking part. I hope you enjoyed tonight's tasting. Quick update for all those who care. The Flames are up 1-0 at the end of the first, which means they're still doing way better than the Oilers, who have a much more
That was
expensive
for
team.
you.
So
And the
go
Canucks,
Flames.
sadly.
On that note, have a good night. Or Evan, are you
night.
doing after hours, or were you just joking about that?
No, I was joking. Maybe Kevin BX will still be here, but I'll be gone.
Well, we'll see. Good night, everybody.
Good night.